Oh my. This is George Takei, and you are listening to the Howard Stern Show. No, it's A Few Words with Eric Santamaria. It's a podcast. What's a podcast? Is it like a radio show? I saw the new Star Trek recently, Star Trek Beyond, and although I have an allegiance to the original Star Trek series, I am enjoying this new reboot. J.J. Abrams' reboot from 2009 was quite good. In the last one, Into Darkness, all I could think was, Benedict Cumberbatch, you are not Ricardo Montalban. But this one I thought was good. My favorite part was that Sulu was gay, in homage to the real George Takei. Although, for some reason, George did not like it. I thought the only way it could be better if his boyfriend's name was Brad. And now I will turn it over to the host, Eric Santamaria. Set phasers for fabulous. Thank you, George, or me as George Takei. My guest today on A Few Words is someone who used to enjoy listening to George Takei on The Howard Stern Show with me and had lots of laughs over the years. You've heard the name brought up many times on the previous episodes of A Few Words, Brian Coppola. He is a childhood friend of Rodney LeConte, a good friend of mine through him. And to celebrate the 10th episode of this podcast, he is the first via Skype from North Carolina, so that's really cool. We're going to talk about some of the good times we've had over the years through video games, movies, wrestling, all the usual sort of stuff. He's also a videographer, just like many of us were, so he's going to talk about looking for a jorb in the video field. That's Coach Z from Homestar Runner, if you remember that series. His album of original music and much more. A couple days ago, we reached the 2-month mark for the podcast, so let's fire up the 10th episode, get Skype running, and let's have a few words with Brian Coppola. All right, the first thing I want to do is clear up whether it's Coppola or Coppola, because I know there's been some discussion about that more recently, because for me, for years, and I've mentioned you on the podcast a few times, and I referred to you as Brian Coppola, because that's what I've known you as for a long time, but weren't you recently like, Coppola?
I grew up with it being Coppola for the longest time until, like, in my 20s, I finally realized everybody who didn't know me directly and read my name said Coppola because of Francis Ford Coppola. It's just how you hear it pronounced, or any other ones that won an Oscar or something like Sofia Coppola or something like that.
Right.
So I just started saying, go with that. That's fine. Whatever.
Any relation?
Yeah, I wish. None. None whatsoever.
How often do you get that?
Too often. And it'll be the funniest places. It'll be like at work when I'm doing nonsense type things, saying, "Oh, are you related to Francis Ford?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just doing research on a part." No. If I was, I would not be where I am.
How many times do you think I heard, "Are you related to Columbus?" Yeah, that's the first time I've heard that in 30 years.
They're original.
Like I said, you've been mentioned on the podcast many times before, and that's because we're friends, and that was through Rodney LeConte. And yes, you grew up with Rodney. How'd you meet him?
Met him back in 1991, I think it was. I had moved to Howell, and I don't remember the specifics. I just know that he and a couple of his friends had come into my backyard, maybe looking for his younger brother. His younger brother, Martin, may have started hanging out with my younger brothers, Scott and Jonathan. I don't even remember talking or anything, but I think then he called me or I called him, and then we ended up hanging out immediately. and then that was it.
When I started seeing all these videos and home movies and things like that of you guys, I thought you guys were a lot younger than that.
But the thing is, the video stuff you saw didn't actually start until more towards 93. So that's where I think I get fuzzy on it, because I remember us hanging out just when the video stuff started. So I guess there was a 2-year interval where that didn't occur. So I got to get rid of that idea of it was like 12 years old. It was actually 9 or 10 then.
Well, you mentioned the video. Well, I mentioned the videos too. But that was something we explored when Rodney was on the podcast. How did you get into that stuff? Was it through wrestling?
We were very much into wrestling. I was not a wrestling fan my whole life, but at that point, I was a wrestling fan, and we were using the video games for Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. He brought out the video camera having seen an episode of Ghost Rider where they made a music video. And I remember us messing around with the camera there, and then I suggested, hey, maybe we could use the camera and do like little intro segments into our video game matches we were recording. And we did that for a while, and then I believe on the podcast he explained when he went and saw the Alfred Hitchcock thing in Florida, it sent him into overdrive, and then I immediately followed, and I saw the direction we could go. Instead of just, talking in front of the camera, we could actually start some maybe narrative stories.
Making your own storylines, playing them out on the Genesis?
Yeah. So pretending it was like the actual WWF, but using, the video games to tell the stories. So then I thought, well, let's start showing ourselves and like the commentators, like Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan standing there. So we'll be standing there talking. I kept trying to get him to get that camera out, and we would do that. But that's the only thing I saw it for.
Well, you kind of had to make your own storylines, because this wasn't like the modern wrestling video games where there's storyline mode and stuff. It was just mash the buttons as fast as you could.
Right. Then making little posters and stuff and cutting up his magazines to shreds to make little posters and hang them up.
Oh my God. I would cut up my WWF magazines to make collages and stuff. And that just kills me now with all those magazines in storage, with thinking like, how much would they be worth if half of this page wasn't missing? And I know exactly where that picture is, too.
Forget
Damn it.
That page, too. You would look through our magazines, and they were like just Swiss cheese. You would just see the light through every page.
Well, you had to save the rest of it, so you were very precise with the pictures you had to cut out.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The articles are intact. That was my whole push to use the camera. But I never thought about, movie making or anything. I think it was a combination of that music video from Ghost Rider, him doing Alfred Hitchcock Presents thing down in Universal Studios, and I remember an episode of the cartoon Doug on Nickelodeon where they made a little movie, and those kind of things all were like, let's do this. And then we tried.
Wasn't that Rodney's favorite show back then too, Doug?
Yes, mine too. That was great.
Well, you mentioned the video games, and your brother worked at a GameStop. You've got an emulator still. And we used to play games a lot. So when did you start playing video games? Was that something early on, continued through your whole life, off and on?
We got a Nintendo, well, it must have been like 1989, I believe. And then eventually Sega and Super Nintendo were the gaming system. But I was never that big into it. I only ever had like 5 or 6 games per system, except for Nintendo. Everybody had bookshelves worth of them. I did have a Sega Saturn, and I liked like the Alien Trilogy and stuff. I could play the first-person shooter type things like that. That basically Alien Trilogy for Saturn was like Doom for the PC. It was just walk and shoot.
Christopher Walken.
Yeah, walk and shoot.
Pow!
But I think, my brothers, they kept buying more and more and more systems. They would have everything. So I would get samples of these games, and they bought a PS1 like you do, and I remember Power Move Pro Wrestling was awesome. GameCube finally came out, and I remember F-Zero I thought was kind of cool. Then Resident Evil 4 came out, and which is why to this day, right now, in my TV cabinet is a GameCube, and there is only one game in the house for it, and it's Resident Evil 4 sitting next to it. That's it, and I keep it there because of that. And that was my all-time favorite game.
How did you get into pro wrestling?
So this was, like I said, 91. We'd go over to Rodney's house, mainly on weekends. Rodney was a massive wrestling fan by this point. I had no clue about anything with wrestling. I didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of it. I thought of stereotypes type stuff, big goofy guys, and I didn't really care. And I did think it was real at that point too, but it just didn't have any appeal to me. Then I remember he had on WWF Superstars, and I believe there was a match with the Head Shrinkers versus two nobodies, two jobbers or something, and it was interesting. Is the best way to put it. Like the Head Shrinkers kind of their finish move with them standing there and the headbutt off top rope. I was like, that's kind of neat. And Rodney was well into the stuff, but it was when I saw, and I still think it was a Superstars or a Sunday Morning Challenge, something like that. The Undertaker, I think, fought Bam Bam Bigelow. Well, that was it. I was hooked. The Undertaker character blew my mind.
Was it just the theatrics of it?
Yes. From the entrance of the lights going out in an arena to him raising his hands and turning the lights back on, and to him having this superhuman strength that he would keep sitting up in the ring. I was never really into superheroes and comic book stuff, but that right there, I guess, would have been it for me. That was my superhero comic book right there. That was so cool to me. I started getting into it. By WrestleMania 10, I was addicted. I know the Bret Hart, Owen Hart storyline caught me completely.
Which was great.
I was so into that. The Survivor Series match with Ray Combs, just to build up to that, and the way it was going to come about in WrestleMania by WrestleMania 10, and that probably was it, that storyline.
What was great about that storyline was a lot of the best heels are the ones that you feel their actions could be justified.
Right.
And in that case, it was done in such a way that Owen's jealousy could be justified.
Yeah, and you could actually see some people root for Owen. I mean, yes, he was playing the top heel or that heel in that situation, but you could see some people sympathize with that storyline who maybe had a big brother taking the spotlight kind of thing. It was great.
I never had a bigger brother, but I totally was Owen all the way.
I was too much of a mark at that point, so I knew I had to be with the Hitman. But boy, did I love it. I loved all of that. It was so great. Still remember that one interview he gave before WrestleMania where Bret Hart said, "I'll give him a fight. I'll give him a damn good fight." Yeah. I remember that so well.
Well, the Wrestling Connection is going to lead up to how we met the first time. Do you remember those circumstances?
I remember meeting you outside of the video room in Howell High School.
No kidding, because I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, FPAC. You guys had just, it was the end of the day. I had come back from a field trip, and there was like 15, 20 minutes left of the day, and I just did not want to go to a class and just walk into it. So that's the first time I was a good boy. I didn't do nothing wrong in school. Never got in trouble in my life. I said, I am not going into a class for 15 minutes. And I walked around.
Didn't do nothing? Did you fail English?
Yes. Never do nothing around here.
But that's going to lead to another question, though, because as we touched upon before, Rodney got you into wrestling and movies and all these sort of things. We'll talk about movies later on, but you are, I don't want to say a technical wizard, but you know so much editing, so much graphic design, computer stuff. I always wondered why or how it turned out that you weren't in the video class that the rest of us were.
Well, what had happened was I never submitted anything, but I was super interested and asked Lagana a bunch of questions and looked at all the equipment, and he could see my eyes lighting up like, oh my God, this is really what I want to do. Everybody submitted things and they were narrowing down who they wanted in the class, and I didn't put in for it. And Lagana actually found me because I was in another class next door and asked me why I didn't, and said, it's still a spot. I can put you in the class, because he saw that I was friends with Rodney, and he saw that what Rodney had put in for it, and he knew I was right there with him. He never even seen anything of mine, but still wanted me in the class. I don't know. I must have just come across as that interested in it. Reason I did is because I figured I could do all that stuff in college level, and I was very much interested in the computer graphics course they were offering at the high school and photography course. And I balanced it, and I saw that if I do that, I can't do FPAC, or if I do FPAC, I can't do the graphics. I thought about it for a long time. It's probably one of the hardest decisions I made when I was that young, because it was early high school. And I went to the computer graphics stuff. I wanted to learn Photoshop. I wanted to learn all the photography stuff and get that background. And I really, really am glad I did. I know I missed out on probably what would have been an incredible amount of fun.
Lots of laughs.
But all that computer stuff really helped me to now I can do incredible stuff with Photoshop, After Effects, Premiere, even the audio stuff. It opened a whole nother world for me, so that when I went into college, it wasn't just video based, it was also audio and graphics and everything else I could do.
So did you end up doing any of those video type classes in college, like you had thought you could?
Yep, I did. First year I did the TV production course, which did all your technical directors and basically your studio directing type stuff, and then I did a field production course, and then your editing class. I ended up doing all the same stuff, just broken up into actual college courses.
Was this at Brookdale? Because I remember hanging out with you at Brookdale a little bit when you were doing one of the editing classes.
I had done a little bit at Ocean County, about 1 year there. Their program wasn't really ready to go when they green-lighted it. Communications media or whatever it was. And so certain classes started to fall through. There was some video class that I had wanted to take. I think it was one semester, and it wasn't ready yet. It wasn't available, even though it was supposed to be. And then the next semester came around, and, we have to close it because we didn't get the things we need for whatever to crap. It was a bunch of excuses, and I said, screw it. And I transferred for a semester to Stockton, actually. Stockton,
California?
Yeah, right. South Jersey there. But then they wouldn't let me take any courses I want. They wanted me taking all these
requisites.
Not even that. I was taking political science, anthropology, and another English course. They were not letting me near the core items that I actually wanted to. And so I said, screw it. I'm not really looking for the 4-year degree. I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing in this field. So that's when I said, I knew that you and Jehoda had gone through Brookdale and spoke highly of it, and I had been there with you when you did an editing thing, and I liked the people I was seeing. I liked the equipment I was seeing. I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going there. And so I transferred. So I transferred between 3 different colleges in the course of a year, which set me back a lot of time, set me back a year and a half of completion, but it was worth it. I ended up getting what I needed, what I wanted.
I got my Avid certification over the summer of 2002 from who was, at the time, I guess the teacher's assistant, Chad Anderson. And I bring him up because you mentioned hanging out in the editing class. And I believe you were working on a project and I was hanging out with you, maybe giving you some pointers or something like that. When he came into the room with one of the editing bays we were at, you want to tell the rest of the story?
It was actually, no, it was your project.
I had it reversed.
Yeah, you have it reversed.
Okay.
It was your interview project of a ring announcer.
Oh, Gary Capetta.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel bad about that. I'm sorry. His name went out of my head. Yeah, we had done that interview, and you were editing it, and that was me actually starting to be interested in switching to there. So I wanted to see the editing bays. I wanted to see what y'all were doing. God, I hate the Avid. And then Chad, he walked in the room. I forgot what he walked in for, just to see who was using it or
he'd
how
come in
it
and
was
say
going.
something like, "Hey guys, how's it going? What you doing? What you working on?"
But he was holding a guitar in his hand. Don't know why. Don't know why. After every sentence, he would play a couple notes. So it'd be like, "Oh, hey, hi guys, how you doing?"
How hard were you and I trying not to laugh?
It was. We held back all that laughter while it was happening, because it happened multiple times, right?
Either that, or it was all one big visit, and after every sentence, and we just thought this was so funny that. As soon as he left the room, we burst.
We burst out, no volume control, laughing, just hilarious. The kicker was I went out to get a drink of water or something like that, something simple. I went out of the room for a second, and you laughed at some part of the interview or something, and I heard you crystal clear down the hall.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God. And I said, wait a minute, laugh again, maybe half of what we were when he had just left the room. and I could hear you crystal clear. So as Chad walked away, he heard us loud laughing walking away.
Great.
But I mean, you know what? He had to laugh too because it was his fault. After every sentence, he played a little chord there. That was hysterical.
Well, you're taking all these different classes: graphic design, editing. What did audio? What did you hope to do with all of this training?
I wanted a well-rounded idea of every little aspect of the production. I guess I wanted to just find some kind of editing job. I really liked the editing part. I think it was the easiest part because then all the content is there in front of you and it ain't yours to screw up. Basically, it's yours to make it into a masterpiece. Whereas the directing part, it is yours to screw up. Or the writing part is my favorite thing because then here it is. If it gets made the way I wrote it, it's going to be perfect. So I wanted to get in some kind of production thing where I'm either in the pre-production or the post-production, but keep me out of the actual directing people, even though I was good at it. But I just wanted to find a job in that kind of field, a video field. In Jersey, it didn't really work out too well, although I did do something with Howell Township for a while, helping with their access channel and putting their council meetings, the township meetings on the access channel, editing them and all that kind of nonsense.
Did you shoot those too?
They had set up a couple remote cameras, so I remote controlled. I had a little technical room in the second floor, and I had all those cameras controlled by 2 cameras is all they had, but I had them remote controlled, and I had the actual switchboard there, and my little preview screens, and my little go-to program screen, and so I was sitting there hitting my little A and B buttons and controlling where the cameras were, and kind of my own director and technical director all at the same time, and post-production and everything else because we had to have a DVD authored of it for backup for their archives, and we had to have it on Access Channel literally the night after. Once I moved down to here in Charlotte, I had found a job for basically like an advertising company who did web video stuff for companies, and that was like kind of almost everything I could ask for because I was working every aspect of putting together a production.
Didn't they have a big green screen studio too?
Yeah, they had somebody create basically 2-wall giant green screen, but like curved, so the floor was also green and it curved up nice and smooth so the floor could be erased and there wouldn't be any harsh lines. It was really well done, like a skateboard ramp kind of thing, if you can imagine that kind of a curve. What I liked too is they were open to my suggestions too, because they had come in when they were playing with, I think they had the Avid or something like that. I was able to convince them to go totally Adobe.
Now, I'm a Final Cut guy, not to cut you off, but when I got Avid certified, I didn't use the Avid ever again. And it wasn't because of a personal choice. It just didn't work out that way. When I started at Ring of Honor, they had a leftover tower from RF Video, and they didn't know what to do with it. So basically, Carrie Silken created a job for me to be the first part-time and then full-time editor. The program that was on the tower that was left over was Final Cut Pro, and I had never been schooled in that. However, maybe you can confirm this with Adobe Premiere or whatnot, but aren't basically all nonlinear editing systems more or less the same?
Yeah, there's only so many things you can do. You're going to cut or you're going to dissolve, you know? You have to be able to accomplish the exact same tasks. So they're all the same. It's just the interface. Do you remember our professor, you at different times, but we both had the same person, Nestorak?
Yeah, Tim Nestorak. Yeah, he kind of looked like Johnny Carson.
Yes. He said it best. He was teaching us on the Avid, and he said, for me, I don't like it. It's like editing with boxing gloves on. And I thought that was hilarious, and that's how I always felt. I felt the Avid was the clunkiest, dumbest way to do everything. I hated it. Absolutely hated it.
But it's been used in a lot of major productions.
Oh, yeah. You watch the credits for any movie, and you'll see the Avid logo come up at the end.
Right.
Pretty much everything is Avid, but, oh well.
I remember Samoa Joe was talking to me once about this idea they had, and it ended up being put on, I think, the Do or Die 4 DVD, but it was an empty arena match with him and Austin Aries, and they wanted to do it a different way. It was experimental, and they wanted to have moves done. Let's say Austin Aries is doing his brainbuster. Then you'd see it in slow motion, and then it would go to a cut scene, basically, mid-match, boom, and he'd explain how the move is done and then back to the match. So I remember Well, that was the idea, and I think it worked out pretty well. If you saw it, it worked out pretty well. I actually re-edited that because the whole first edit I had of it, I lost. I accidentally deleted it. I had to do the whole thing over from the beginning. Luckily, nobody knew until now, I suppose. But point is that I remember Samoa Joe explaining to me what his vision for this was, I guess, or the way to do it. And he said, yeah, you could do it on the Final Cut. They make movies on those things. Whoever they are, I guess. Maybe the TNA faction. Point is that all these programs, like for instance, I was Avid certified and I didn't know Final Cut when they first hired me. It took me about a week to figure it out, just based on what I had known from a couple years before. Adobe Premiere, I don't know. I've never really used it outside of the times that maybe you or Rodney showed me it, and Final Cut X or 10 or whatever it is. I know a lot of people didn't switch over to that at first because it was so drastically different. In fact, Nigel McGuinness, who you may remember from Ring of Honor, he was making his own documentary, and he would call me up and ask me technical questions because he was editing it himself. The problem is he was using Final Cut 10 and I didn't have that. So things were different.
You know what's cool is I recently watched a movie. It might have been Deadpool or something very recent. And I remember watching the entire credits and I saw Adobe Premiere instead of Avid. And I was like, yes! It was like, win one for my team finally.
Yeah.
So it's a personal choice and whatever people want to use. And you're going to be able to do the same things. Premiere probably has the most scary looking interface because if you never touched Photoshop, and that's why I was okay because I grew up with Photoshop, it's the same sort of interface with the same kind of layout and text and phraseology, if you will, on everything within the program. So if you never touch an Adobe thing, you're going to be like, whoa, what is this? It seems very, text oriented at times, where everything else looked like it had buttons everywhere, like an Avid. Premiere could be scary at first, but here is why I loved Premiere, and this is why I sold people very easily on switching to Premiere, is everything was integrated with all the other Adobe products. So in other words, when I was doing the marketing company in Charlotte, we had a lot of graphics packages we had to work with, and those graphics packages were built in Photoshop, and then I added some magical stuff going on in After Effects, and then edit your final in Premiere. Well, the company says, we want to change the background of the lower third to red. Okay, I don't got to rebuild the whole world. All I got to do is open Photoshop, make a couple clicks, it's now red. That adjusts instantly in After Effects, which adjusts instantly in Premiere. It's one step, fixes everything. And that's what I really loved, all the integration, which also means when you're done, one render. You don't have to pre-render out of anything. It's one solid render. So that was my little elevator pitch for the Adobe Suite, which won over a couple people in my time.
Backtracking a little bit, that's not the answer I had in mind when you said that we met outside of video class, because that's not the first time I remember meeting you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we digressed big time. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We're going to get back to where we were.
When we actually first interacted, was it a ladder match?
That's right. Now, we'd mentioned before on the podcast that I did this wrestling video in my basement with all my friends. We had our own matches and storylines and characters and everything. And Rodney and I were going to have a ladder match. How we finagled this, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure it was Valentine's Day, because St. Valentine's Day Massacre happened in 99. Pretty sure it was on Valentine's Day, the day of Massacre, because what we didn't know is that The Rock and Mankind were going to do the same match on Monday Night Raw in their rematch, and a ladder match with the same sort of finish too. But point being that we went to the backyard of their old house in Howell.
Yep.
You were going to be the second cameraman. Lawrence was the first. And that's when I remember meeting you first, when I'm getting beat up and thrown around a ladder in Rodney's backyard.
Anybody in our age group in that Attitude Era had a video going on, whether they were wrestling on their trampoline or in their backyard or in their swimming pool or whatever. They didn't take it as serious as you did. You actually made it into a full tape series with storylines and everything, but everybody was into this at that time, and that's why I was there. I had actually tried to start doing the EWA in my backyard with Rodney. I showed up with the with my camera, not to really to act as your second cameraman, but to get my own footage to use it in our videotape if we wanted to. We didn't know if we were going to or how in the world we would work it in, or maybe we would just use, B-roll cuts of Rodney fighting somebody else. But it was very selfishly there just to get the footage.
That's all news to me. I'm disappointed because I'm like, a lot of that footage was good. Like, you had this great shot of when Rodney won and he had the title walking away and the ladder was in the foreground, Rodney in the background, and you happened to get the "be careful stepping on this ladder" warning. It was perfect. It was great.
You had said, "Oh, maybe can I borrow the tape when you're done, and that way I can have two camera angles." And then it became, let's share this. This is really cool. We never actually did use it for my stuff, though. So you solely have that.
Well, like you said, it was much more elaborate because I didn't know about all these other backyard things going on at the time. I think it was early '99, maybe, that I saw all this, quote, backyard wrestling stuff on the news, and it was all these schmucks with barbed wire and setting themselves on fire and thumbtacks and all this other hardcore garbage, and I was like, that is not what we're doing at all.
No. When we did our little thing in the backyard, it was only one, couple matches worth, but it was very tame. I think we were more smarter. We had become smarter to the industry quicker than I think the others who jumped in just because they saw the NWO and DX. I think we understood storylines. We understood that it was protecting each other. I don't know. We were a little bit more mature, so our stuff was not hitting each other to hurt each other. Our stuff was not ridiculous bats and breaking things over each other. It was very scripted and very fake, but it held more of a storyline. We were telling little movies. It was a lot better than that crap that you would see on the news back then that would get all the media attention because some idiot broke their neck or whatever.
Well, I don't think it was until maybe a couple years after that meeting that you and I really hit it off.
No, we didn't.
So how did that come about?
I want to say probably it has to be one of my movies, and I would probably guess it was the quote-unquote CD movie, The Desire for Truth.
Before we dive into Desire for Truth, let's just let everybody know that you and Rodney would make a lot of, I don't want to say home movies because people think that's just like shooting the family at home. I mean homemade movies.
Right. That's the thing when we were talking about the backyard wrestling. There's backyard wrestling, and then there's a production that we're trying to do that just happens to be in a backyard, where if you say a homemade movie, I'm not walking around just point and shoot and hope for the best and nonsense like that. We're actually taking whatever we had at that time in our lives, technology-wise, and taking it for all it was worth. Nobody could edit with two VCRs better than me. But
hey, I was pretty good.
With the dubbing in music using, if you had stereo VCR, you could have the original running in the left and the music running in the right. And have varying soundtracks.
I wouldn't even do that. I'd set up a camcorder in front of the screen, record and put headphones over the input.
That was the beginning. Then it evolved to two VCRs.
Right.
Once we graduated high school, it was a matter of let's start branching out, bring new faces into these movies that we were doing, and I started writing a little bit more larger scale maybe because everything until then had taken place mainly in my house, in Rodney's house, haunted houses, whatever.
And it was a lot of kids from the neighborhood that you'd recruit to star in it.
I don't remember if we were hanging out with Rodney and you were there a bunch of times, so we were all hanging out, or what happened. I just know that when I went to do this other movie, this Desire for Truth CD movie, basically I keep calling it the CD movie because somebody steals a CD with a whole lot of information on it and everyone's after it. That's the gist of it.
X-Files inspired.
Oh, God, yes. X-Files ripped off. But I know after that, then there was another movie, the Disturbed film, where everybody was in it. Jehoda was in it. Lawrence, you've all heard now on the podcast, he was in it. Everybody was in that one.
Well, we had a lot of common interests. Obviously, there was wrestling, video games, there were movies, and there was also badminton.
Yes. Oh, Lord, badminton.
Now, how did we get into badminton? I know for you played tennis with Rodney when you were younger.
Junior, senior year, we got into tennis. Badminton, I know Rodney and I would always just play. We would just hit the the birdie back and forth.
That's the clean version.
Yes. Yes, that's the G version. I remember we would go diagonally across my entire front property and just slam that birdie back and forth across the entire yard, and that we would just do that for like hours. So much fun. And a couple times we'd have like neighborhood people would show up, and then we'd end up having like 5 on one side, 5 on the other side. Boy, do I remember the tournaments, and boy, do I remember playing.
What appealed to me about it is for tennis, I didn't like the rhythm of it. I didn't like waiting for that ball to bounce first and then hitting it and letting it hit the ground and this and that. I loved the precision, the immediacy. Don't let it hit the ground. And just the buoyancy of it.
Yeah.
You and I just played it nonstop like maniacs. I remember we were all watching SummerSlam 2004. This is back when you had, what is a hot box?
Right.
Because at some point we just got so sick of WWF that, you know what, we have a passing interest or some minor interest in this, but it's not worth the money. We're not going to spend 30 whatever dollars every month on this garbage. So I remember SummerSlam 2004. There were 3 matches I wanted to see. The opener, because Paul London was in the opener, was like the Dudleys versus London and Kidman or whomever, and I thought this was going to be the big breakout match for him. So I watched that. All right, don't care. Go outside, play badminton, fight off the mosquitoes or whatever. I come back for an Eddie Guerrero match or something. Okay, back outside.
Back in the good old days of analog when you could unscramble channels.
Yeah, all that changed when everything went to digital. Then we couldn't scramble it anymore. Then it was Hooters for us.
Yeah, because still weren't going to pay for it unless it was WrestleMania. Then we all felt the need we could put in $5 a piece.
Well, I think I actually tore my labrum from all the badminton playing because I don't know what it says about me psychologically, but anytime I get into something like that, I want to be the best in the world at it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be so good at badminton. I'm going to win the Olympic gold medal, and I'm going to turn it into this, and I'm going to turn it into that opportunity, and all this other shit fame brings. Even with video games. Like, I remember the Blockbuster video game tournament in 1995. I'm going to be the best in the world at Donkey Kong Country. I'm going to do this, do that. And I still think I might be in Mario Kart 64 if given the chance. But I remember going to the store, and I wasn't even the best in the store.
Oh, God.
Like, that was very crushing. But all this wear and tear, it wasn't like an injury, like I went for this dive and hurt my shoulder or something. But eventually I'd have this pain in my shoulder, especially when I was driving to Ring of Honor, because that was a bit like a 50-minute or an hour-long commute at a time. And every once in a while, I'd get this dull pain in my shoulder for no reason, really. I didn't get it checked out because it wasn't chronic or anything, but every once in a while, I'd just grab my shoulder like, Eventually, I got it x-rayed and found out that it was a torn labrum.
Oh.
And the sports doctor said the only thing to do outside of surgery, because it doesn't really require surgery, you're not in that much pain, is just to do physical rehab for it. Mm-hmm. But I never did that. And it's fine now, but I'm very certain it was from that motion of the racket.
Some people may be thinking, badminton, how do you get injured in badminton? Like, they're thinking of the light little tap in the birdie back and forth over the net.
And that is not how we played.
No, we were playing for blood. I mean, it was, you threw every ounce of your strength into hitting that thing. And how many times did we hit it and the racket was starting to get weak and the strings were losing their tension, so the darn thing would go right through the racket or get stuck in the racket because you just hit it so hard.
Oh, there was a lot of wear and tear. Strings would break. Birdies would break.
We dove for everything. Because also, we're lucky enough we weren't playing on concrete or nothing. We were playing in the backyard.
Right.
Which, by the way, when we started, was a lush, thick grass. And we were done. It was a rocky dirt nothing. My dad hated us playing it.
That's all from sneakers.
Yes, we destroyed that backyard. So you can imagine how often we were playing and how hard we were playing. Because it takes a lot to completely knock a full lush lawn down to dirt.
Yeah, the Summer Olympics are coming up, and all the Chinese players are going to go for the gold again. And it looked almost like that every time we'd get together. But the other thing that we bonded over was movies. Mm-hmm. I've been trying to get into acting. Rodney was trying to get into directing. So we've been in and around movies and sets and things like that over the years. But it started from just our love of these films growing up. And you and I eventually would hang out like every Friday. We'd have pizza. We'd watch Real Time with Bill Maher afterwards. But we'd also watch movies. And It was kind of like our own little movie club. where one week I'd choose a movie, usually one you hadn't seen.
Yeah.
Then you'd choose a movie and we'd switch back and forth. In fact, I remember when I got hired at Ring of Honor, you had helped me set up the surround system in the family room at my house.
Yes.
And to celebrate, I bought myself the recently released Star Wars trilogy on DVD. Now, granted, this had been like the third edit of these movies, but it still looked and sounded incredible in surround sound on the big screen. I haven't seen the Blu-rays.
Oh my God, they're incredible. They're very, very good. I'll put in the Speed Racer scene from Jedi just to demo the surround sound if somebody's never really felt a 1,000-watt surround sound system in a very small room. And I mean, every move they make, it's in a different speaker, and when they go through leaves, it flies from the front to the back of the room. It's just one of the great demo scenes to go to for somebody.
My go-to is still Attack of the Clones and the Seismic Charges.
Yes, that is also a very great one because what a unique sound effect. Really awesome idea on that thing to go silent for a split second.
One of the other things we would do on these movie nights is we would play the movie trivia game on DVD, Seen It.
The thing I didn't like about Seen It was anything other than the DVD. It came with a board game. I never touched the darn thing.
Oh, we never did.
Point to it. It was stupid. I just want to see the clips and the little quiz things on the TV, and the interaction is more fun then. So I remember we just would hit the play, select each little play thing, let it play the scene or put the question or the spelling thing up there or play the audio clip, whatever it did, and just shout out the answer. Whoever shouted out the answer first. I think that was a way more fun game to play rather than the board game thing that they make you do. Yeah,
we never used the board game. We played it more like a movie version of Jeopardy in a way because it would be you, me, my parents, and my sister in various combinations, but I'd keep a scorecard. Undefeated, by the way.
Yes.
How I won is knowing a lot about movies I haven't even seen yet, just knowing about them. And there's different versions of Seen It. There's Disney Seen It, James Bond Seen It, et cetera, et cetera. But the general ones, I'd compare it to Jeopardy because there would be different sort of categories. And one of the ways they would present the question is through pictures. And you had to kind of guess what they were trying to say through the pictures. And you're laughing because you know exactly what I'm going to bring up. Do you want to explain the pictures?
Basically, you're sounding out these images to create words.
Yeah, and this category was an actor.
So you had a picture of an owl. You had a picture of a lollipop and a kid licking the lollipop. I think you had a bald guy and then some lady winning a sports event, like running through the ribbon or something with her arms up. So you had owl lick bald win. And
keep in mind, we had no clue. We had no idea what the hell this thing was trying to say. We're like, bird, lollipop, everything wrong. It sounds like it makes sense when we say it. But at the end, when the answer came up, I think we laughed for probably half an hour.
I know.
Owlick Baldwin. This sounds like Team America. Owlick Baldwin.
And we kept, to this day, we still say that. If any movie he was in or something, if I bring up, Hunt for Red October was on the other night with Owlick Baldwin or Beetlejuice. You know what I just found out a few hours ago? I'm an extra in one of his movies. Are you serial?
Yes, I am. I had no idea he was in it. It's a movie with Danny Glover, a boxing movie called Back in the Day. I was an extra in it a couple years ago already, but I watched the trailer for it just today, and Owlick Baldwin is in it. So hopefully I make final cut and you can see me in the background of one of the boxing scenes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So those were some really great times and very fond memories. And also around this time, because you mentioned all the different jobs you were doing with video and whatnot, we started doing videography for Lawrence's dad, DJing different affairs and stuff. We shot my friend Stephanie's wedding. I used to work with her at the Monmouth County Library, and I remember the date because it happened to be the same night as No Mercy 2003, which we didn't watch. I only finally saw that Brock Undertaker chain match recently, but we had some good times doing video. I was so happy to be working with you.
That was pretty fun. The wedding videography. It wasn't my ideal thing to get into with video. That was not definitely what I was thinking about.
Me neither, but we still found a venue to be creative.
Yeah, if you enjoy doing video, okay, you can turn it any kind of video project into something fun. So I'm thinking of shots, I'm thinking of angles, and I'm thinking of making the wedding video very nice for these couples. And at the same time, you think about you're going there, you're listening to music for a couple hours, you're getting fed. I mean, it's not really a bad time. You're making good money doing it.
Hopefully a good tip too.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed that.
Plus, we were working together, and
Right.
it's always the most fun when you can work with your friends.
I remember working with you, a few of them. Many I did by myself, because I continued on, I think, and you had stopped. A few of them, my brother Jonathan went along with me just to back up a camera or two, and I had no problem splitting some pay with him and everything. And he was still in high school, so that was good stuff for him.
Where I lived in Manalapan, I believe it was the St. Thomas Church was across the street from the development, and we were doing a wedding there once where that was the ceremony. The reception was somewhere else. First of all, we're walking up into the building, and I said something like, I think I'm going to burst into flames the moment I walk through these doors. But
Yeah.
you talked about being creative, and just the way our minds work. As soon as I'm walking into a venue, I'm imagining shots. I'm coming up with the cinematography for it immediately. And there was this really nice stained glass design on the ceiling. And we go up to where kind of the altar area was. And I was going to do a shot up to this stained glass and make that the DVD menu, because you were going to edit this, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the priest came up and said, we can't shoot there. Like, he was adamant about it. He had a real attitude too.
And he told you there were no matter where you shoot, you will not have a tripod in the church. I remember that specifically. And so you actually had to go put the tripod in the car or something like that.
Jeez. Yeah, that makes it real easy. Thanks a lot.
I actually had to shoot sitting down. I didn't move the whole time. I sat, I think, second row on the last seat on the aisle and shot sitting down the whole time, and you couldn't. That's it. There's one shot through the whole thing. And let me tell you, there were many churches I went to doing all these wedding things that, like you said, you walk into it, and some churches or whatever. Some churches, they went overboard. It's, gorgeous stuff. And I'm thinking angles and shots, and that was the only time I had that experience, because any other time I had every priest I ever met, or I think I did one where it was a Jewish and Catholic wedding there, and so we had a rabbi and a priest, and everybody was all so pleasant to work with. And oh no, you can go here, you can go here. Do you want a microphone up here? Helping and everything. That was the only time I ever had a negative experience in a church situation like that. It was one you were with.
Yeah, of course, it would be me, because when you have a wedding ceremony booked for your church and it's going to be shot, this is a big surprise that videographers are coming in. And he made it a big thing, like, I don't want it, with a big stupid smile on his face. I don't want it. Well, what did you expect? How am I supposed to shoot this thing?
Right. This is a sacred event.
Oh, yeah, and your big gaudy church, instead of that money going to feed the homeless and the people who need it.
And how much money are they giving you to do this big sacred event? Because it ain't free, okay? They're paying you, or they're donating a certain amount to the church. Maybe they're not paying you, but they're donating a good amount to the church. And they're also paying me to get video of their sacred event. And you're telling me I can't. So I got to sit there and hide in a corner. Oh, I felt so bad. But it came out okay. But it's one shot. It's one angle. The whole thing.
Right. Well, eventually, as the years go on, we get to, like you said, 2007. That's when you moved down to North Carolina with your family. I was very sad to see you go. How did it come about that you moved all the way down south from New Jersey?
It was my father's job, and I was not at the point where I could support myself living in New Jersey with New Jersey prices. I just couldn't do it. It was not going to happen. It didn't really seem that bad to me, this idea of move down south and restart. The restart your life almost seemed appealing to me at that point in my life. I accepted that idea. I'm glad I did.
Well, things definitely worked out, but at the time I was very upset to see you go.
I missed everybody, definitely miss everybody, and that was the negative part, leaving New Jersey. And a lot of people rip on New Jersey and think it's fun to do that. Well, you only see what's on television, okay? So if you live in real New Jersey, you know that the beach area is very nice, and I live 10 minutes from it, and I used to go there all the time, and I miss it like you wouldn't believe, and miss friends and family. But
Don't get me started on that New Jersey shit because people rip on it all the time. Living in New Jersey all my life, it really upsets me because it's not true. There's every kind of landscape you could think of in New Jersey.
It's beautiful, and people have that bullshit show, Jersey Shore, just did a lot of harm, and people also have the whole Italian stuff up north, Jersey or whatever. Forget about it. They have that perspective and that idea of what Jersey's like, and they don't realize, like you said, the Pine Barrens. I mean, you talk about forest. They're like, why do you call it the Garden State? It's just factories. No, it's not at all.
There's a lot of horse farms and open space in Central. Up north, there's mountains in Sparta. We have every kind of weather.
I was just on, I think it was, I don't want to plug another site, but it's like a neighborhood watch type of site. And basically it gives where you are a 1 to 100 rating on how safe that area is. And Charlotte down here is rocking like a 16. And up in Jersey, you're hard pressed to find anything under the high 60s as safe from crimes and attacks and violent crimes. And even New York City is higher than Charlotte as far as safer. Don't talk about Jersey being that bad when there's actual numbers that say, no, you're safe and you're in a really good place. Schools and everything. It's a very, very, very good state that just gets a bad rep because of stupid attitudes in TV shows.
And I went all over the country when I was with Ring of Honor, and I would hear that sort of thing all the time. Oh, you're from Jersey? I have never heard anybody speak like that in New Jersey my whole life.
No, there's like one town somewhere in North Jersey, right under New York or something, that speaks like that, I guess. Or one Italian person they found, and I'm Italian, and I don't know that person, so I don't know where the hell they got that from, other than those shows, Sopranos and whatnot, that created that false idea.
Well, what upset me too about you moving to North Carolina was we were just starting the Wrestling Roundtable. And you know that if you had just stayed around, even if it was another year, you would have been on that show all the time.
Right. I would have, and I think that you would have had a lot less stress in your life. I can guarantee you would have, because, let's put it this way. You think about when Rodney would go into shooting his movie It Girl, how I would show up an hour beforehand and set up and make sure everything was right and go over stuff with them and all that pre-production stuff. And I helped them with the post-production too. Well, shoot, I would have been involved in worrying about cameras and angles and shots and sound and this check and that check and mic check and all right, you can't get to this editing, give me this footage, I'll get this part ready and you send it to you this way. I would have been all on that. Sorry.
It would have taken a lot off my shoulders, but I wasn't even thinking about it from that angle. I just mean you would have been on the show too.
Yes. Wrestling was not too good in that era. I didn't really have very much I was enjoying.
Well, me neither.
And I was not a UFC fan.
But that's when you talk about like SummerSlam 1990 or something like that.
Right. It would have been fun. You did end up helping me with some stuff. Like I needed a clip for Pro Wrestling Respect. You sent it over. You actually helped design the Wrestling Roundtable logo because I had a specific idea in mind. Alex Payne helped me with the graphic design too. I wanted a specific type of font. Yes, you did.
It didn't quite really exist, so you helped mold it.
Yes, we created it from scratch. That was about 9,000 back and forths with that logo to get that just right.
Well, we got there eventually, and I thank you for that. I thank you for everything that you did. You got married. Rodney and I drove down to North Carolina, and it was like 6 years had never passed. And it was great to see you again. We were playing badminton again and celebrating a great time. How do you compare living in the South to your former residence up here in New Jersey?
There isn't that much of a difference. I like New Jersey because I think everyone's more equal. The negativity of the South is still very much there, which they'll deny, but that's why they'll raise their Confederate flags without an issue. They're still blind to ideas.
That's my heritage.
Right, your heritage. Oh, don't get me started. I don't want to get in. There's a lot more separation in classes around here, I swear. There really is. It's a different world, but it's a very more relaxed, slower atmosphere down here. But I'm from New Jersey, so I like the faster pace, and I like the clearer thinking. I miss the blue state, let's put it that way. Especially coming up to an election, I miss being in a blue state, because hearing some of these people's comments and rants this time of year, oh, it'll just drive you crazy if you're a person with an actual coherent thought. It makes it difficult there, but I definitely love parts of it down here. Let's put it that way. It's nice.
One of the things that you showed me over the days that I was there was magic and some of the projects that you'd been working on in the time between us seeing each other. So you have a YouTube channel. Tell us what we can see on there.
YouTube.com/films128. Films 128. That started as just some random stuff. That channel, it really molded into something fun because I was trying to figure out how to do a thing on a computer, and I could not find a tutorial on how to do it. And I had to piece together like 4 different ones that made sense to get something accomplished, and I made my own. And that sucker is something like almost at 1 million hits once I actually created that. And then I realized, I'm going to start putting all my movies and stuff. And so I started putting...
Pudding?
More pudding. I'm putting movies and reviews, and I started getting into music stuff on there, which got a really good following. Because I started talking about the keyboard I have, the functions of the keyboard, the things you can do with it. I didn't realize that would be something somebody was interested in. And all of a sudden that started taking off. Stephanie created a weight loss type show on there that really took off. The big thing right now is Stephanie is my wife. I keep saying the name. I don't know if anybody knows who the hell I'm talking about. When we were living out in Lumberton, North Carolina, remember when I was talking about that safe rating website? Lumberton gets a 0 if you actually put it in. It is that dangerous of a place. It's hell on earth. We were living in a trailer inside. It looked like a nice home. But when we were out there for something to do, living in a field that was 2.5 hours away from anyone we knew, we made a movie. We made a found footage horror movie. I put it on YouTube maybe like 2 years ago, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere now, that thing is blowing up on YouTube. Thousands of hits are coming in the last couple weeks, and comments after comments. So Remnants, if people want to watch, if you're into that found footage kind of horror movie, Paranormal Activity probably is what inspired us to do it then, because that had just come out and that was pretty good. People are liking it. So if you're interested in a found footage, go watch Remnants on my channel. And then Magic is on there. If you like that Harry Potter type stuff, basically I just really wanted to play with special effects. And so I figured, okay, let's do this whole Harry Potter stuff. I never actually watched those movies, but I saw what they looked like. I saw the fan base they had. I wanted to get into something that would just get some fans behind it, so I sold out. So I made that. It's an effects-heavy kind of little film.
Now, you mentioned your keyboard, and right now you have an album available.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask you about that because I didn't know over the years that you were so musical. I knew you did some keyboard type stuff, but where did all that begin and how did this album come about?
I've always played the piano and keyboard. Again, sort of the way the Remnants film came out is being stuck in that trailer in the middle of nowhere, 2.5 hours from anyone you knew. You got to develop some new hobbies. And I started with a MIDI writing program on a computer, kind of writing music and realizing, this is pretty cool. But that's where it kind of stayed for a couple years until I bought a really high-end keyboard here about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, realizing that I could record music right into my computer. I could layer it, I could build it up, and I could make it sound the way I want. And I've always had these little melodies floating around my brain. Just didn't think I really had an outlet for them. It never occurred to me I could record music. I don't know why. It was like I had an idea to shoot a movie. I picked up a camera and did it. I don't know why music was something that I felt like was untouchable for me. And then I realized, no, I can do this, especially once I got a good keyboard that had a really nice sound to it. I said, let's just record these things. And so layer it in and make music, and ended up with enough songs that I said, you know what, this is actually an album. So I said, all right, fine, we'll call it an album. I'll see if anybody likes it. Put it out there. It's called Autumn Winds. The music I like to play, because I'm writing it all and composing it all on one keyboard that's creating all these different sounds, I am semi-limited onto what kind of genre I'm gonna get to sound the way I want. And It's also my writing style is I like to write stuff that's soothing. It really is a new age type of sound, in a sense more like towards what Enya would be known for.
Enya?
It kind of yes, it kind of deviates into some other genres of sound in there, but some of it is very soundtrack. Some of it's very like a movie score, very ambient. Maybe even no melody is really present. It's just soundscapes would be another word people have come up with for that kind of thing. You know, you're not painting a landscape, you're painting a soundscape, and it just kind of creates a world in your mind if you're listening to it. So it's very quiet, relaxing, soothing type new age stuff called Autumn Winds, and that is available pretty much anywhere, but the easiest place to find it is cdbaby/Brian Coppola, my name. It is on iTunes and Amazon and all that, but if you go to CD Baby, you can actually sample the full songs before making any kind of download or anything like that.
And one track on your album is dedicated to my parents.
It's called A Melody for Memories. Every song I write starts with a concept in my head, a visual concept. Like there's one called To Grandma's House. Basically because I had this memory of any time we were going to Grandma's house and driving up the Garden State Parkway and going to her house, and her house had this river out front with a small little waterfall. And so I get this visual idea, and then I write a song behind it. Melody for Memories was just thinking back on all really good memories, and a melody kind of came out of that somehow. I don't know how this all happens, but it does. Encompassed all these really great memories from growing up. Later on, once I had heard about your parents, then it just had an emotion that I just felt the need to dedicate that one to your parents.
I just wanted to say that my parents loved you. I love you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. And we mentioned movies before. You and I have a laundry list of movies that I'd love to talk about. So please come back.
That's what I'm looking forward to most. I know a lot of people, you don't know me, so you're just getting sort of an intro to me. Believe me, once we get to movies, that's where my opinions are going to start to fly. You're going to have to stop me from talking and shut me up at times.
Well, I'm going to shut you up right now because we're done. Thanks for doing this, Brian.
Yep.
Pudding.
Pudding.
I think it's very fitting that on Brian's album Autumn Winds, he has a track, To Grandma's House. One of the many things we worked on over the years was we actually did a interview with my grandmother. It was for nothing other than posterity. I wanted to preserve this story of her life, and I actually got the idea from a teacher at Brookdale Community College. One of the times he taught his history class, he had mentioned this idea. I don't know if he got it from another student or something, but he told the class we should set up a video camera and do an interview with our grandparents, get that life history, get our family story, preserve that history. And I thought it was a great idea. So Brian and I went over to my grandmother's apartment one day, set up the camera, and he conducted the interview. So I thank Brian for that and everything that he's helped me on over the years. As we mentioned, Brian will be back, guaranteed. We have plenty of movies and other things to talk about. So that's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, I encourage you to check out his album, Autumn Winds. And speaking of movies, next week will be the first movie episode of A Few Words. We will be talking about a movie that recently celebrated its 30th anniversary. That would be 1986's Big Trouble in Little China. Tiger Schulman's MMA Joshu, Brandon the Mechanic Catino, a previous guest on this podcast, will be back, and we will be talking about this action-adventure, sci-fi, martial arts, whatever you want to call it, classic. The last time the Mechanic was on the podcast, he was promoting his fight July 30th. It actually got canceled, unfortunately, but he will be fighting in Glory Kickboxing in New Jersey coming up September 9th. That's huge. That's very exciting, and more on that next week. Listen on SoundCloud, subscribe on iTunes. A favorable review would be much appreciated over there. A like on Facebook as well, a follow on Twitter at A Few Words with ES, or send us an email, afwpod@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to look up the Wrestling Roundtable's YouTube account. That's still active. Look for our mini episodes and just keep supporting the podcast. I really appreciate it. On our way out here is A Melody for Memories, the track from Brian's album Autumn Winds that he dedicated to my parents. It's much appreciated, and I hope you enjoy it. See you again next week for another episode of The Pudding Show. I mean, A Few Words. Oh my.
You mean to tell me that all this stuff, all this shit that's been going on is because of a CD?
Actually, it's a CDR,